Hi, my name is Josephine and these are my creatures. Hello and welcome to yet another collab video. What can I say? I love my doll friends and I love collabing with them. This time my collab partners were Kiro's Workshop, Jackie O, Ms.SuperClear, Blank Space Dolls, I Could Do That DIY, and the Dolly Geek. We did not have a strict theme for this collab, but the idea was to challenge ourselves and use a LOL OMG doll as the base. You can find links to everyone's videos down below, and I highly recommend you give them a look because everyone's creations are so cool. I actually got this LOL OMG Groovy Babe doll secondhand to create a very specific character, and I shared my purchase on Instagram, and that's how I ended up getting invited to this collab. When I made the realization that an LOL doll would be perfect for this one specific cartoon character, I just had to make it come to life. The character I'm talking about is a little witch called Planchette. She is a character in a webcomic created by Hayley Newsome. She also has a YouTube channel called Lavender Townes where she shares her experience as an artist and gives people advice and tips on how to improve their art. She has a very unique style and I thought it would be fun to try and transform one of her cartoon characters into a doll. So let the transformation begin. After doing the usual steps of cutting her hair and removing her original factory face, I'm going to do some brain surgery and cut open her scalp. LOL dolls have very tiny neck holes and super thick vinyl heads, so taking the head off and removing the stubble that way is difficult. Plus, I have some other modifications in mind, so I need access to the inside of her head. I'm removing the molded on eyeliner to give me the right shape to draw on her eyes later. I sand the area with my Dremel tool to make it smooth. Her luscious pout is next on the chopping board. If she was Babs, it could work, but Planchette is more of a sweet and happy character, so the pouty lips gotta go. I'm taking things super slowly because I can't add anything back once I have removed it. I ended up opening her mouth to a happy smile because Lavender Townes draws Planchette with her mouth open all the time. In addition to my Dremel tool, I used an X-Acto knife. Then it's sanding time! Yay! Someone shared on our collab chat that wet sanding works great, and it does. It makes the surface so much smoother, faster. I need to make some more modifications to her body, including removing her nips. I find nipples on dolls kind of creepy. Planchette also has a very exaggerated pear-shaped body, so making the boobs a tiny bit smaller is going to help with that. I accidentally nicked a hole on one of her boobs, but I ended up filling it later. This LOL doll has rubbery legs and a bend and snap knee. I don't know why companies do this, there is so little movement that it's basically nothing. She is a witch and she flies around on a broom, so I need to modify her knees to make her sit on a broom. First, I cut off a chunk of her vinyl flesh about where the knee is. It was very interesting to see what the mechanism looks like. I went to town removing the hard plastic core from the squishy vinyl legs. I will be replacing the plastic with wire so that she can pose. Planchette also has teeny tiny feet, and she wears more of a flat shoe, so the arched feet of the doll also needs to be changed. X-Acto knife cuts vinyl like butter, so I remove a chunk of feet and reposition the toes so that the foot looks smaller and doesn't have as high of an arch anymore. I used super glue to fix things in place. Later, I will fill in the gaps with Magic Sculpt. The doll has extremely realistic hands compared to her super cartoony face. And everyone on our group chat agreed that that's a little bit strange. Planchette has fun-looking noodly arms, and I think that's one of the things that make her very recognizable. So I'm going to cut off the doll's arms and figure out what to do later. In addition to filling out her feet with Magic Sculpt, I also used it on her torso, to make her waist just a tiny bit wider and not so pinched in. I was really lucky that Lavender Townes has made so many videos where she uses Planchette as an example, like her How to Master Cartoon Anatomy or Keep It On Model drawing your OC the same way every time. I will link her channel and the videos so that if you want, you can check them out. Like I said earlier, Planchette has her mouth open all the time, and most of the time you can see her teeth. And I think that makes the doll look so cute. I made the teeth out of a piece of paper, and I will also add another piece of paper to seal her mouth from the rest of her head. I use super glue to fix the teeth in place. To make sure nothing moves, I add a ton of hot glue on top of everything. Then I glue her skull back together. I was really jumping all over the place when working on this doll, so bear with me, please. I sanded and then painted her torso. I ended up not liking the paint color, it was just off too much, so I removed it with rubbing alcohol because the plastic of the body can't take acetone. Attempt number 2 was to use sealant and pastels. In the comic, Planchette's skin color is just paper white. And I think Lavender Townes did that to limit the color palette and make it easier to create the comic pages, because you have to color the same thing over and over and over again, so it makes sense. For my doll, I wanted her to be very close to white, but not quite, because her outfit is going to have a lot of white in it. I ended up doing 5 layers of white pastel and sealant. I also added some blushing to her face with a peachy tone pastel. On the 4th layer, I decided to add the eye whites with acrylic paint because I was blasting through my sealant can at that point. I add some additional shadows with brown, purple and black pastels just around the eyes. I add freckles and some lines to her cheeks and nose. Then it's time for the goth phase. I was so nervous doing this face up because it was so out of my comfort zone, and doing the black around the eyes was a all or nothing moment. You can't really see Planchette's eyebrows because of her bangs, but I thought she should have some nevertheless. So I just made them pretty simple and kind of high up to match the happy expression of her mouth. In comics, it's very important to convey the character's emotions very clearly to the reader. And in Planchette's case, her pupils often change to different symbols depending on what she is doing. And this story in the comics starts out when she moves into a house that is haunted, and her new friends try to get rid of them. So the ghosts are a big part of the story. So that's why I decided to go with tiny ghosts as her pupils. Her eyes are so massive that I need some serious shading to tone them down and not to make her look completely insane. The little ghosts are getting some eyes and a mouth with a orangey red watercolor pencil. I tweak the shading a bit and then add in the white catchlights with acrylic paint. One last coat of Ms.SuperClear matte sealant and then I can add some gloss varnish to her eyes. In the beginning, I added some kneaded eraser to her mouth to block the sealant and the pastels from getting in. Let's unmummify her legs as well. I had already forgotten how much the color difference was. Look how huge it is! Speaking of her legs, I did decide to paint them with white just in case. I didn't do the color change with sealant and pastels on the legs because I was worried it would chip off because the vinyl is so squishy. I think paint is a little bit more flexible and easier to patch up if anything chips off. Now it's finally time to rejoin the legs. I added a good squeeze of hot glue into the hole left in the thighs from removing the bend and snap mechanism. Then I shoved two of the wires into the hole and tried to squeeze the thigh shut while the glue was cooling off. I then twisted the wires together and used some super glue to make sure my slits at the back would stay closed. A clothes peg is a great tool to keep the sliced rubber leg open while I try to squeeze in some hot glue. I poke in the wire and hold the leg closed. It's okay if some glue oozes out, you can just trim that later. Like I said, I was very chaotic for some reason when working on this doll, so we are jumping around again. This time to the arms. I really wanted to get cosplay for the arms, but it's not sold here and no one ships it to my country. But what I do have is flexible 3D filament called TPU. You can print whatever you want and they will remain flexible after. So I made this very simple 3D model of the arms with my software. It is my first sculpt and it's very crude, but I think it will work. I ended up printing a test print and modifying my file a little bit. The first version was too wide and it made the arms crease when I bent it. And the fingers were too small and they just blended in too much. To make the arm posable, I made the arm hollow and added some wire. Then it was just a matter of drilling a hole for the arm and inserting it. If the wire becomes too loose or it weakens over time, it's quite easy to replace because I'm not gluing the arms in place. Not doing this will also allow the arm to swivel. because I am a chaotic person, we are going to jump again, this time to her hair. I had these 2 yarns already in my stash. Planchette has a very interesting hair color. It's like a grayish desaturated blue. So mixing these 2 is going to be my best option. I cut the yarn to smaller pieces and then tie them to a popsicle stick. I brushed them out using a pet brush, and then I smoothed them out with my flat iron. I glued the loose fibers to a plastic bag to create wefts, and then it was time to glue them to her head. I have to say, these are my best yarn wefts ever. I think it's because before I was using yarn that wasn't 100% acrylic, simply because I could not find any yarn that was 100% acrylic. And when I finally did, I bought every single color they had. At this point, I ran out of wefts and had to pause to make more. Once I reached the crown of the head, I took a thicker weft and folded it over like this to create a nice part. The other side was already glued in place. I gave her a haircut. I decided to just cut it blunt because there is no way I could make those blobby looking hair pieces look good in real life. So a blunt cut is an okay solution. I've wrapped her bangs in plastic to try and keep them down. Unfortunately, I ended up messing up the gloss on her eyes while working on the hair. I fixed it with a fresh coat of gloss and this time left it ample time to dry. Let's work on her clothes. I took apart the tights she came with to turn them into a pattern for a white pair and some socks. I ended up buying some underwear to make the tights from. The material was perfect and I don't need a lot. I used the existing hem to save some time. Planchette has black socks, but I didn't have any black stretchy fabric. And I remember that in one of her videos, Lavender Townes does share that originally Planchette had stripy socks and black shoes, but she ended up changing that so that her design would be easier to draw over and over again. But I thought, I'm only making one doll, so I can add all the details in the world. And I love making socks from this fabric. They always look so cute. Now let's fix her skinny knees. I added some stuffing around the wire to build up the shape and then I just put the tights on top. I think this is a great way to add articulation. And trying to construct rigid knee articulation from clay and popsicle sticks would not work because the legs are vinyl and not hard plastic. The downside is that the doll has to wear the tights all the time, but I'm not planning on changing her outfit because it doesn't change in the comics. She would not be a witch without a witch hat, so we have to make that. Paper mock-up is essential when you need to figure out complicated shapes. I transferred my paper mock-up to fabric and cut the pieces out. I wanted to line the hat with a different fabric just to make it a bit more fun. I added some interfacing to the brim and then I sewed the pieces together. I added a piece of wire to the point of the hat so that I can pose it better in photos. I saw this one drawing of Planchette in an alternative outfit on Lavender Townes' Instagram, and there Planchette had a little star hanging from the end of her hat. And I had this little star charm laying around, so I thought I could add that in. Now, this dress was the reason why I wanted to create this doll in the first place. I just had this huge urge to make it and see it on a doll. I start the dress like always by making a pattern. Once I have the paper pattern, I can transfer that to my fabric and cut the pieces out. This fabric frays, so I treat the edges with matte medium. The skirt part of the dress is made out of white and black panels that slightly taper at the top. I mark B for black and V for white. You can see that the white panels are rectangles. That's because I want to pleat them to create the tapering end. And to help give the dress some poof, I sew the panels together and press and pleat them accordingly. I needed to figure out how this garment is going to close. First, I thought that I could make it center front closing, but change it to a center back closing. I had to cut the back piece in half and add an additional panel to make up for the lost fabric, but it worked in the end. I decorated the front seam with some lace because I thought it could use some detail, and I really like how it looks. The scariest part, but also the reason why this dress is so cute, is the sleeves. I make the pattern for the sleeves really wide to have a nice poof in it once it's gathered down. I have always thought that Planchette's sleeves are skulls, but now that I think about it, they could also be ghosts. What do you think? In the comic, you can see that the sleeves end in this scalloped edge. To me, it looks like the teeth of the skull. So I added some lines to my sleeves for the teeth and sewed the sleeves in place. Next step is to add elastic around the cuff so that the sleeve will poof up. I closed the side seams and the seams on the sleeves. I turned the top inside out and attached it to the skirt part. To make the dress poof out a bit, I decided to add a petticoat. Petticoats are super easy to make. You just need some lace trim, cut to size, and some ruffles if you want. Close the side seam and use some thicker thread to gather to top edge and voila! A petticoat! Now to close the back. I hate Velcro and I tolerate snaps, so I often opt for a corseted closure. I just need 2 needles threaded to each end of the twine to lace up the back. Planchette has a Peter Pan collar, so I added that to the dress as well. I decided to take the easy way out and just glue it down. I can't resist adding a bow and some silver buttons on her dress as well. Now that I see the arms with the dress, I wanted to add a little bit of color to them with pastels. The white fabric is very thin, so it's not as poofy as I would like it to be, so I add some stuffing to them. She is all but done, except her shoes. I make an inner sole out of paper and a tiny heel from craft foam. I cut out 2 uppers from black fake leather fabric. Because I changed the color of the socks from black to striped, I think white shoes would not look good anymore. I glued the uppers to the inner soles and added the outer sole and heel. I switched out the red craft foam to paper last minute because it was too thick. I cut out a piece of the upper to make it look like a Mary Jane shoe. The socks are slightly uneven, so I will be gluing a white piece of fabric inside the right shoe to make the sides match. She also needed some more chunk on her hips, so I added some padding to her tights. She is missing some very important accessories, so let's make her broom and her familiar bunny, Winston. I tackled the basket of her broom first. I went on Thingiverse and looked up some baskets. I printed out this one, but as you can see, if you print this small, there is a lot of something called stringing, and that makes the print very messy looking. I looked for different designs that would have larger holes, but could not find any. I decided to 3D model my own. It's super simple and it's not quite accurate to the one in the comic, but it's the best I can do for now. And after finishing the broom, we ordered a resin printer that would have printed the basket in full detail in the size I needed. So keep your eye out for more 3D experiments. I painted the basket and then it was time to tackle the actual broom. I used a barbecue stick as the base. And turns out they make excellent cat toys as well as doll brooms. I painted the barbecue stick brown. I thought that this twine could work as the bristles of the broom. So I cut up a bunch of pieces, unraveled them and glued them down to a plastic bag. And then glue them to the barbecue stick. I made sure to include some holes at the bottom of my basket so that I can fix it to the broom with some twine. To save some time, I will be making Winston's body out of polymer clay and used some wire and magic sculpt to add the rest of the details like his paws and ears. I paint Winston white and spray him with Mr. SuperClear. I used watercolor pencils and a little bit of pastel to give him his face. His super fluffy tail is made out of yarn and I just glue it to the hole I made earlier. Now, the absolute final accessory for this doll is some earrings made out of polymer clay. Planchette is described as being a kitchen witch, which means she does magic related to food. And I thought it would be super cute to give her an egg and bacon earring. They kind of remind me of Gudetama. And now we are finally finished. Making this doll really pushed me out of my comfort zone. Her Faceup really isn't like anything I have made before. It was fun analyzing Planchette's design and character to try and translate that to a doll form. I do have some things that I wish was better, like the skirt panels not being right, and I also made her just the tiniest bit taller with my knee modification. I should have cut out more of her legs to avoid adding additional height. And her basket is a little bit too chunky, but overall I'm super happy how she turned out. Her arms worked great, but one thing I noticed is that over time the layers are separating. So in the future I might print new hands for her and change the direction of the layers from horizontal to vertical, and that should help with that. If people show interest in the comments, I might upload the files to Thingiverse, so do comment down below if you need them. I would probably burst if Haley from Lavender Townes would see this video. So if you can tag her in the comments or on Instagram on one of my posts, it would be great. I love her channel and I had so much fun transforming her character into a doll. Don't forget to watch everyone else's videos. I know I will be watching them the minute they go live. All the links to everyone's channels and videos will be down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't yet done that, like this video and leave a comment. I would love to know what you think of my planchette doll. Until next time, bye!